putting this in the chat. You'll also notice, and I think we can utilize, I think this group will be small enough that you can absolutely utilize the both the chat feature, but also feel free to unmute yourself at any time and just pop in whenever you have any questions. So again, if you are just joining us, whether you are from the DPI or whether you are from a TSI or CSI school, if you would just name your, put your name, role, and whether you represent TSI, CSI, or both into the chat. We're going to be very informal today. We're just basically want to offer the opportunity for anybody to answer any questions that may come your way. We'll give everybody maybe just like one more minute to trickle in. One other piece is we are recording this for anybody who couldn't be here, but I still, and for note-taking purposes, but I still want people to feel comfortable speaking candidly as you guys come in. All right, I'm letting everybody sort of come in and enter your name in the chat, and we'll just give a few minutes for people to join us, and then we will kind of start some question and answer portion. I think I'm gonna get started. It's always hard to know, especially I know it's the end of the school day. I know people might be coming in at a variety of times, but I also just want to honor everybody else's time that joined right on the call. And this is an optional thing. And I know I put out a reminder today, but I had set up this original feedback session because next year just looks different for what the TSI CSI process will look like. And again, there will be leaders on the call that will represent TSI, which is typically a one-year identification. We could potentially be going on a year 3 for a one-year identification. And then CSI, which is typically a 3-year identification. And we are moving into a 4th year of that designation. And so because of COVID and just because of the change in administration, things are constantly changing at a pace that's sometimes even challenging for all of us. And so what this originally was set out to be is we had received information from the U.S. Department of Ed on a potential for a waiver, not a complete waiver of accountability. We were always asked to take state tests and to basically meet our students' needs in however way we could that we see fit. But what we were given the waiver to from the U.S. Department of Ed was that we would be able to move forward the 3-year identification process, so the CSI process, and they also told us in that same waiver process that we got in December that we would not be able to do that for TSI, that they would be asking us to identify TSI schools because it is a 1-year identification. We just got notice this week that they added a piece of flexibility to that, and that was the memo I just sent you guys this morning, but Superintendent Baszler sent out on Tuesday. So this meeting was really originally designed just to speak to the current schools and say, hey, we're going to be identifying new TSI schools. What would be supportive? What are some things that you have found helpful? What are things that you would like to give us some impact on, or some feedback on whether it was impactful or not? And we still want that to be the case as well. But I also know that there may be a lot of questions that you might have. And so what I would encourage you, Sheila Schlaffen from Turtle Lake Mercer was on the call first, and she had asked a question that I want to start with, and I'm sure for schools that are comprehensive support and improvement, this is maybe front and center. So Remember, CSI schools were told due to the addendum that they, although the, typically this would have been, if we started in the very beginning, this would have been their third year of CSI, so they would have had the opportunity to exit if normal circumstances had prevailed. Now they are going to be able to move that designation forward 1 year, and so the schools that are identified as CSI will stay in CSI status next year. And so Sheila's number one question, and she may have others as well, but was wondering in terms of will ed direction or frontline be required? And what we've talked with ed direction, and we've talked with our executive leadership, that will be up to you. So you will receive grant funds, and you will receive it at, we haven't decided on the exact number, in terms of what might be available. That sort of sometimes has to be when we gather up all the funds on what is spent, what we get allocated, what will overall be the number that might work out. But in terms of that, we've decided that it will be up to each school, CSI school, who had been required to work with ed direction for the last 3 years. It can be up to you on whether or not you want to continue the ed direction services, or whether or not you would like to move beyond ed direction services. So does that, Sheila, does that answer your question? So you can't, so the answer is you may, but it is not going to be something that we require. And so it just depends on, some schools might want to continue their support. Other schools might be ready to use funds for something else.
Sure. So do you know the timeline of when we'll know what those funds look like? So, we would know if it was using it for ed direction, or if you wanted to use those funds in another way to maybe bring in somebody, because it has been difficult this year. Just not having them on site at all has made
absolutely.
Like we ended up with new coaches this year, and not that it's like a bad thing or anything, but that definitely has made it more challenging to have some new staff, and then have new coaches from ed direction, and just to kind of build those relationships and like that trust. And so I think the sooner that we can know kind of what that looks like, that would be helpful.
That's actually such a good point. So what Rachel and I, and Rachel Tabler is on the line as well, and she's my partner in crime as we work through TSI, and a number of other DPI folks are on the line as well, as you guys can see, because there's several DPI staff members who are liaisons with certain schools in certain capacities. So I just want to welcome everybody that's joining, including the TSI CSI school leaders. And that's such a great question, because one of the things that Rachel and I have talked about is we see no reason, whether it is if we truly do end up freezing TSI schools as well, since that is a possibility now. And when we thought we had to, earlier this week, I thought that I was going to be identifying new schools, and now that's changed. And there is a possibility that they too will be frozen. For both, if that is the case, if that is what we decide, and for sure with CSI, we plan on being able to do a very quick turnaround in that June, July capacity, so that you shouldn't have much of a break in between. And when we talk about the reason that I can't give you like the ultimate number is, honestly, I think you can think, the awards for CSI have been between 80 and 100,000 for the duration of your guys' grants. Basically for a total of 300,000 for the 3 years. We have basically decided that we don't see any reason why it wouldn't be around those same numbers. But we've kind of wanted to, similar to how we just did this request for additional funds, we sort of want to open it up to you. There may be schools that need that amount, need more than that amount, or need far less, especially as we consider all of these other funding streams that might be coming your way with ESSER and so on and so forth. So the more that we've been talking about it, the more that Rachel and I are leaning towards, but I'm saying that in just because there's been no decisions made, we're leaning towards more of an open application. Like, here's something to consider, but you tell us what you need, and then we will be able to go ahead and approve based on alignment, as long as it meets school improvement categories, that it meets your overall school needs. It's not something completely out of left field. those types of suggestions. And of course, we would give guidance. But we either way, we plan on being able to do a very quick turnaround from close out in June and the next year.
Thank you.
Is there any other, and I know this is always hard because there's people who represent CSI and TSI on the phone, but while we're talking about CSI, is there any other people that are on the line with the comprehensive support schools that have a question in regards to the CSI realm? And feel free to utilize the chat in addition to unmuting yourself.
So one more question. So timeline wise, next year, when would we really know if we were out of CSI or TSI status? Like, what would be the timeline for kind of being notified of that?
That's a really good question. The timeline is a tricky little game because honestly, such a big chunk of the accountability pie is on the state assessment, and that does not, it takes a little bit of time. So the timeline for identifying TSI and CSI schools is really not until August. And so what I am encouraged by though, and this is the part that makes me a little, as much as it's been a kind of a roller coaster as we've decided what our support framework will look like, the one thing that I think will be helpful is that it is our intention to run accountability data this year. So we, in this August, even though we're not going to be identifying new schools, we will have that same list. And so we'll have some data that would be, yes, it will have involved a pandemic year. Yes, it will have all of those other caveats, but it would give us some indication on where you might fall. And so I believe, and we don't know until we see that data, I believe that we will be able to have some really more personal conversations with those of you that are identified on where you fall on the list and what data that is, once we run all of the different pieces of the pie, where you would fall so that we could be more preventative. We could say, hey, guess what? Turtle Lake is not even on the list, or, oh shoot, you're right, here you are on the list. This could mean, it will just give you some indication of areas that might be able to have 1 year of knowledge about whether you're kind of teetering on that brink. And I would encourage, Greg Carlson is on the list, and he is a university system researcher and helps us with that. Am I answering that question all right, Greg, in terms of the timing and what we may or may not know for these schools to help them?
Certainly. I think our typical timeline for what we would do in the past as a preliminary review period for schools would typically start toward the end of August and then go toward September. So by that time, we would have that preliminary list of schools based on rankings that would qualify for support. And then, of course, we would hear back from schools and any questions, concerns, data review, anything like that. And then any adjustments could be made for a final list that would come out. But that timeline is contingent upon us having all of the data that we need to make those determinations, which includes having our assessment files from the vendors. It includes having all of the graduation data that has to be submitted by June 30th and other data that has to be submitted by June 30th as well, in addition to having the growth calculations completed, because that's definitely a key factor in the measure as well. In the past, we have been able to basically adhere to the August timeframe, and our plan is to do that this year, keeping our fingers crossed that we get the data that in the time frame that we need to, and so forth. But I think we can expect that would be the general time frame.
And then the following year, which is what I think, so the CSI schools will be frozen, but I think that how we would treat it, Sheila, and again, don't have my crystal ball, but I think that we would treat it as if you were closing out your grant, you know, at the end of next June, and we would kind of operate under the assumption that you guys were exiting, and then if you were back on the list, then we would move forward with the same process, even if it's a school that had already been identified, if that makes any sense. So we would go to, you know, if you think back 3 years ago when you were identified, it would be a similar situation, but obviously some schools may be on the list again and other schools may be brand new.
Okay, so like that year, the year that we were identified was like, I think it was like May or something, or maybe even April, we were kind of identified, or we knew about it. So then this next time it will be June of 22, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when we'll close out our grant funding. And then it would be August of 22 that we would know totally if we were identified. Okay.
The reason for the different timeline at first is because North Dakota was the first state to release the SI accountability back in 2018, but it was based on data from the 16-17 year, which we already had. So
sure.
that skewed the timeline to in a sense. So we won't know as early next time as we did last time. I just wanted to clarify that.
But it will, part of the thing that I think will benefit, and this will be for TSI and CSI schools, is how that when, you know, when I think about having this frozen year, if everybody is frozen, I think that will be a little bit of a benefit, because for the first time, we'll sort of have this list that's sort of almost, I don't want to say like warning, that seems really negative, but it's sort of a warning list, so that we could potentially not only let those of you that are frozen in status, but we could potentially even reach out to other schools that we could say, you know, if we're not identifying new schools this year, we just want to let you know that you would have been identified. And so just FYI, here are some areas that you might want to consider, so that when we run it next year, you may or may not be on that list. Does that kind of make sense? I feel like that might give us a little bit more of a jump start to have some conversations that we would not have been able to have if this was not allowed. So, okay, I'll open it up to any questions. We've got a couple of other schools on the line, and we just want to make sure that we are, I kind of wanted to answer any CSI questions, but I know that we've got some TSI schools on the line as well. Is there any other questions? Again, just completely open responses on questions we'll start with, and then after that we'll offer up time for some feedback. You have to ask that. Have good wait time. The other part that I want to, I'll open it up as well, and again, use the chat feature, and DPI members, if you guys have questions, we can answer that as well. The one thing too, that if for feedback, I would just love an open and candid conversation on any of the application or the support requirements, on any requirements that you have been having to do, like including, you know, working with a school like a vendor like EdDirection. We are just taking it all in right now, and that will help us factor into our decisions, whether it's for next year or even the year following, as we have a whole new set of cohort. So I just would like to open it up for whether it's a question or whether it's just a comment about future practices.
I'll say, I think using web grants has been really nice. I think that really streamlined things. That was a lot easier than the other application. So that was very helpful. And I think, you know, maybe speaking for myself and for my staff is, you know, going through this and being on year 3. And I think having someone from Department of Instruction even just coming to like visit our school and visit with our staff would be really nice. And I know that you guys are really busy and you do a great job of like answering questions and doing all that. But I think like that would be, I don't know if it's like the place for like a nice gesture, but I think that would be something that would go a long ways with our schools, with our teachers who are here, kind of doing this every day, just to have someone from Department of Instruction kind of come out and like just see, because sometimes you kind of feel like your school is probably like this horrible place, and you know that it's not, and so I think just kind of coming out would be a huge thing that would.
Sheila, I love that you brought that up, and it's not ironic that you bring this up, but that was something as we were designing the framework, and even when Rachel started last June, that was like the first thing that we were going to do. And then of course COVID hit, and so it made site visits so incredibly difficult. But I do believe you're exactly right, and we wanted to do that for two reasons: not only to build relationships and see what you guys are at, but what I would anticipate for current CSI schools. We wanted to come out and see, because we could do just that as we think about the next cohort. What does need to be built in? So I just want to say it is loud, and that it's very much heard, and we absolutely want to build that into future situations, because you're right on. And I think that's the other thing. I love that you brought that up, because my other question, and I see Angela, you have a question or comment as well. One of the things that we're trying to do, but no matter how much you swing it, you feel like you're on the naughty list because you have to do the parent notification, you get on a list, and now if we're frozen, then you're on the naughty list, and we don't even know if you would have been on or off the naughty list either way. And so how can we continue to show that it's a support and not a naughty list? Like, and so a site visit would be one, but I just would like to, as we onboard new schools, or even those of you that are currently on, how can we continue to build that conversation that says that it's not like the worst thing in the entire world that you're on this list, and how can we really truly make it a supportive place? So
Amanda?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, did someone else have their hand up?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay. I want to say two things. So first, Sheila, thanks for giving feedback on web grants, because I don't think that there's any time is a good time to make switches. And for us department staff to be like, oh my God, we have to do web grants now, like, and learn a whole new system, but to have some feedback from the field on how it's going is immensely helpful, right? That gives us like a reason of like, okay, it might be a huge learning curve and it might be a totally different process, but it's not the end of the world for you, or it hasn't been this huge barrier for you. So that gives us a little bit more fire and like, okay, we can do this. So I think thanks for that feedback. The second thing that I think regarding visits, so it gets kind of tricky, because districts have said that to me as well. Like, we'd love for you to come out for a site visit. And I'm like, awesome, let's figure it out. And then we go. If I happen to be in a community and be like, hey, Ann Ellefson from DPI, like, that just doesn't feel, it feels more of like, what's the agenda? Why are they here? So possibly an idea, Amanda, for you to showcase with the schools, like, let TSI, CSI, like, schedule us a time when it works for us to come out to visit. And it's truly that, for a visit. It is not a monitoring, it is not an agenda, it's not but it takes a different tone when a school says, we'd like you to come out and visit, than when DPI says, we'd like to come and visit your school. So I would put Rachel, put a challenge out to TSI, CSI, like, get somebody from DPI into your school. Like, that's your challenge for the year. They'll come and do it, but it has to be kind of like that we're invited to the birthday party, not that we're going to come and crash a birthday party.
That's a really good point. That's super helpful. Exactly. Yeah, that there is no agenda, and we're not looking for mistakes or whatever. So that's super helpful. Any other thoughts or comments, either building off of that or new ideas?
Well, I think just so many times, the good stuff doesn't show up in that application, and the good stuff doesn't show up on the paper. And it would just be nice, there are things going on, good things, really good things that are happening. And just to get out and see the kids. So I totally agree with Sheila. And I also agree with her on the ed direction thing. So I just wanted to throw that in too. It's just not been a good year with ed direction.
And that's, and so one thing just to let you guys know, as what we've been throwing around, but that's why we wanted this feedback session, is, it's the balance where we want to make sure that there is some support, that's a possibility, but we also want to make sure it's support that's helpful. And I don't know, is COVID the factor? Is it just the third year? Like what, maybe there's a blend of it, maybe it's this, unsettled, but that's super helpful as we think about what we can do. But I can promise you right now, we've already made the 100% decision that will not be required. And we're also trying to consider a way. I know that CSI, not TSI, had a continuing application, and we will do that again through web grants, but we're also considering even, again, it's the balance of simplifying it, and you don't want to simplify it to the point that we can't meet our federal requirements, that we're saying, well, we're going to give you money, and you have to be able to tell us something about what you're going to do with the money. So we're at that balancing point, but this information sort of helps us determine what it is. And Assistant Superintendent Lori Maskey just told me the other day, as this letter came out from the Department of Ed, I said to her, that's what's so challenging, is how do we tell these schools that you have to do this, and this, when they're frozen, and they may or may not have had the data to support this, or they may have the data that puts you into that situation may long look different, may have shown improvements, or you have other issues that maybe are not as relevant as they once were, a couple of years ago. So she even said too, she's like, I think that we are not looking at next year being the year for any major shifts or any major requirements, that we will attempt to offer as much flexibility as possible. And in that same vein, I love the idea that Sheila brought up of really hopefully inviting us into the school and being able to maybe keep considering what the next cohort's framework might be. And we'll get another year to build that up. We've already been, as Steph and I have been kind of transitioning into this role, and Rachel and I have been sort of taking this on. That's already been in our wheelhouse. With continued feedback from those of you who have lived it will help us continue to refine that process.
Another thought just on the ed direction, like I've enjoyed our partnership with ed direction, and I know that this year it has been just different, but just like thinking of all the travel and different things like that. And I know, not trying to there's already teacher shortages and whatever, but even the thought of I don't know if it's a possibility to have just coaches within our state of North Dakota that do the work, that do know North Dakota, that kind of know, maybe it's small town or whatever it might be, that maybe have a little better understanding. I think the ed direction's done a great job of trying to learn that and to do that. And but I think if there was our own people here in North Dakota, a few individuals that could be those coaches that work with our schools, I think that would be something nice to think about too, if that's a possibility. But I know that's probably easier said than done. So.
No, 100%. And there's already been some conversations for both TSI and CSI on how we can capitalize on our own state, utilizing regional education associations and other entities that are able to do this. And potentially there's even opportunities for future schools to come from those of you that have lived through this and becoming, I think when we see homegrown mentors and other things be utilized, I agree that there's some of those pieces. That's helpful. Anybody else? Any other ideas? This is exactly what we wanted, you guys. I know there's not a lot of you on the call, but we wanted it to be open and transparent, and especially since there's just a small group here, I really, if you've got even just a one-on-one, like a question just about your school, it's probably not just for you. this is your opportunity to ask it. And if there are no other questions as we go, you know, we will end when we need to end. But I do want to just like completely open it up to you to ask anything or say anything if you've got some ideas. So one of the things that I think, just as we kind of wrap up today, and I know, and I just want to just thank those of you that were able to even come in and just listen and learn. We hope that this is not the last time, and as we put out memos and communication, and as we know more, March 9th will be the meeting where we have the ESSA committee. But I will just say that there seems to be there's this idea just nationally that it just doesn't seem appropriate to identify new schools based on pandemic year data. And I totally understand that. But I also have been trying to speak for those of you that have been identified and say, well, is it really fair for schools that were identified prior to the pandemic to just live in this state of purgatory forever and ever, you know, either. So what we're gonna, like I said, what our goal is to try to strike a balance and make sure it's really, really clear, and that that we have appropriate expectations and appropriate use of our funds, so that it can be, you know, more flexible, and that it can be really clear where you're at. And we do hope that we're able to share some really good data with whether it's a TSI or CSI school, based on what we're able to collect. And it will be interesting. It's just going to be interesting to see what that data looks like. I don't think any of us on this call, DPI or school, can predict what our state level data is going to show us. You know, what we've collected through student engagement surveys, what we've collected through Choice Ready information, as that's been, you know, being built up, what we're collecting through, I missed the one, student engagement, you know, or NDSA data. So we just will have a lot more factors, I think, that will be known in the fall. So we will just continue to offer these up. And if you guys have any questions, we want you to know that not only anybody, you know, not just Rachel and myself, but anybody on this call is willing to answer any questions as we continue. So any other final thoughts or final comments? Well, I'm glad we had even just a few people. We'll continue to offer some of these in everybody's busy schedule. I know it's incredibly difficult, but we'll continue to offer it up, and whoever can join can join. And anytime that, I know Rachel and myself have had lots of really great conversations with you guys one-on-one, either via email or via phone, but at least we can put a face to a name, and we are always there. And we'll hopefully be working with you guys to schedule some opportunities to come out and see you guys. And maybe it's not even out of the realm of possibility even this year. I know, like, we've even talked about here at the state, we've had some really encouraging numbers, you know, come through in terms of COVID. And so can we dip our toe in the water, and with safety protocols, we don't ever want to put you in danger or ourselves, because honestly, it might sound like you guys sometimes for those of us that live in Bismarck, we don't want to bring anything to your communities either. You know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So we want to make sure that we have all those things in place, but maybe it's not out of the realm of possibility that we can't get out there to some of you guys and have you guys show us around. It'd be great. All right. Thanks everybody for attending today, and call or reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.
Bye.